Hey guys, it's Faith Borges for Communications 101. This is my mom for the audience. We have Steven. We have my cat Bugsy. He is a good listener. That's why he's here. So I do have notes in front of me that I will be reading off of just because it's a lot of information. So, like I said, my name is Faith Borges. This is going to be my informative speech for Communications 101. Before we start today, though, I just want to inform anyone who's sensitive to the topic of sexual assault to proceed with this speech and caution. It's a very heavy topic that we're going to be discussing today. Okay? With that being said, the specific purpose of this speech is to inform everybody watching about sexual assault, the sexual assault epidemic in America, how we as a society promote it, and what the government is doing to combat the issue. First of all, we're living in a society that's depicted to be unsafe for women. Women can't feel safe walking alone at night to their car, anywhere really. We're driven by this fear of sexual assault and the fear that our stories are going to be misheard when we do come out and tell somebody about anything that's happened to us. Today we'll discuss everything to do with that and how it's a direct violation of human rights. So first, let's define it. So sexual assault is defined as unwanted sexual conduct with no consent given to the perpetrator, and many factors are involved to contribute to the occurrence of sexual assault. However, during the course of this speech and just in general, I want to let everybody know that the perpetrators, not the victims, are the ones responsible for the crimes. It can happen anywhere at any time of day. Common places where drugs and alcohol are involved, but it also happens in less obvious places, like sometimes in your own home by a trusted family member or a friend. Many times it even happens in marriages. It's very common. Even though marriage is a consenting relationship between two adults, that doesn't mean that your partner owes you their body 100% of the time. A marriage does not mean consent. It's actually more common that it happens in safer environments, so like at a friend's house, for a party, things like that. The victims, they range from all ages, sexual orientation, race, and class, and it's actually a lot more common than you think. A study done by the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control found that in America, a woman is raped every 2 minutes. 22% of victims are younger than 12, 32% were between the ages of 12 and 17. And out of college students, 9.2% of college females have experienced sexual assault sometime during their 4-year college experience. The perpetrators of these crimes are often actually miscalculated. So there's this misconception that majority of rape is committed by those who suffer from mental illness. That's not true. Sexual offenders actually come from all sorts of educations, occupations, different racial and cultural backgrounds. It oftentimes comes from a power complex in men that men are strong, women are weak, I deserve this, you owe me this. That's actually part of the reason why men are sided with. It's because of the common belief that men have needs and, they can't help themselves. This all stems from what is called rape culture. It was a term coined in the 1970s, used to describe how society blames victims of sexual assault and normalizes sexual violence against women. It allows us to live in this society where we don't teach, where we teach don't get raped instead of don't rape. So we're telling women, you need to be safe instead of telling men to not do these things and that these things are wrong. Recently, social media stars are under fire. People like Jake Paul, Tony Lopez, Andre Lopez, James Charles, Shane Dawson, Onision. Happening right now, we got David Dobrik and the Vlog Squad. All of them, that's just to name a few social media stars. They've all been accused some degree of sexual assault. And when the victims came out, they were bashed after naming who had done this to them, as if, they're the ones to blame for these social media stars abusing the status that they hold. We also see this in big stars as well. People who come from money or status, people like Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, even the entire Jeffrey Epstein, everyone involved in that scandal. People in power and who come from money often get a slap on the wrist. It's very sad. Community service and a few months probation, maybe. That was actually exactly the case with Brock Turner. I'm sure we all remember that. He was the Stanford swimmer who got caught in the act of sexually assaulting a woman from, I don't think she went to Stanford. I think she went to a different college, but he was caught. And when she came out and told the school, she had all these witnesses, and they're like, oh, well, he has such a good record here. He's a swimmer. He holds such good values for our school, and no one really said anything about it. She did end up taking him to court, and it ended with him getting 6 months in jail and probation. So We see that. But again, it happens in all sorts of people. So even like the case of the Night Stalker, people like that, he was just an ordinary guy living on the streets. He did have a case of mental illness, but he was living on the streets. And then there's people like Jeffrey Epstein. So there's two different scales. But in Minnesota recently, a court rules that a rape charge does not apply if the victim chose to drink beforehand. It indicates that somebody under the influence only lacks judgment if the drugs or the drinks were given to them without their knowledge. So like roofies, things like that. This all adds to the idea of rape culture. It's us turning to these victims and saying, okay, but what did you do to cause this? Did you do anything to prevent it? You know, and if you didn't, then what's going on? So we'll talk a little bit about human rights and we'll define that. So human rights are the rights given to everybody, at birth. It's basic rights based on shared values, dignity, fairness, equality, respect, and independence. It's the idea that we are all equal. These rights are defined and protected by law, especially in America. It's written in our Constitution. Well, it's supposed to be, right? A lot of people don't realize that sexual violence, it has a lot of psychological, emotional, and physical effects on a survivor. And these long-term effects are not easy to deal with. So a victim of sexual assault, they're adding on top of all of this that we just talked about, they're stripped of their confidence, their dignity, and their identity of who they are. And remember, it's a person's human right to be allowed all those three things. But the court agrees. They agree that these people deserve these things, unless it's the case of sexual assault. And in that case, maybe try harder to not have this happen to you. Basically, Minnesota's words, right? So like we said, when victims are shamed and they're questioned, this is a lot of times known as victim blaming and discrediting of a witness. In the case of Andre Lopez, he's a TikTok star. I don't know if anyone's seen that, his dancing videos. He was accused of sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl. When she came out and told people turned to her and were like, well, you're 14. Why are you at his house? Look, here's the situation. These stars and these celebrities, especially TikTokers, know the majority of their followers and their fans are minors, and they didn't take the necessary precautions, they're having this party. Instead of being like, hey, are you 21? It was just sort of like a, whatever, come to my party anyways. They didn't take that necessary precaution, and yet she's still blamed as a 14-year-old. It's her fault, And this whole thing being said, it explains why more than 60% of rape goes unreported to police. In America, we need to do better. Sexual assault is not just a problem here, it is in many countries around the world. However, following the death of Sarah Everin, hopefully I'm saying her name right, but it was a recent case that happened in the UK. After her death, UK officials wrestled with this idea that men should have a curfew, saying that, we have to regulate men and start teaching them to stop raping women instead of forcing women to fear men in the shadows of the night. With all that being said, we see this violence against women, just like the violence against anyone, is a human rights violation. And women don't live to gratify a man. We don't ask to be taken advantage of. Because of this thinking of, rape culture, whatever, everything is always this will always remain an issue in America. And sexual violence will continue to be an epidemic as long as men are viewed as more credible than the survivors of sexual assault. And actually, it is April. It's the Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So to anyone who has ever experienced this heinous act, I just want to let you know you are a survivor, you are seen, and you are heard. Okay? Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Faith Borges. We got the family here. Hi, guys. We do have... He fell asleep during my speech. So rude. Thanks, guys.